The wooden spoon slipped from my fingers and clattered against the kitchen floor. Around our dinner table, my family writhed in pain, clutching their stomachs. My daughter-in-law Brittany pointed at me with a shaking finger. "She did this to us," she screamed, her face twisted in fake agony. "She poisoned the soup." My son Dante looked at me with confused eyes, doubt creeping across his face. The room spun as everyone groaned and doubled over. Then my 7-year-old grandson Lucas tugged on my apron. His small voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Grandma, I saw Mommy put the white powder in the pot when you went to get napkins." The accusations died in Brittany's throat. Her face went pale as Lucas continued. "She told me not to tell, but you're crying, Grandma." My heart hammered against my ribs. For months she'd been making my life miserable, but this was different. This was evil. I knelt beside Lucas, my hands trembling. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" He nodded solemnly. Dante stood frozen between his wife and his mother, torn between two truths. But looking at Lucas's honest eyes, I knew the real villain wasn't me. 3 months earlier, I'd moved into Dante's house after my husband passed away. The grief felt like carrying stones in my chest, but I thought being near family would help. Dante welcomed me with open arms, setting up the guest room with my favorite quilt and fresh flowers. Brittany smiled when Dante was around, but her eyes stayed cold. She'd watch me unpack my things, arms crossed, like I was invading her territory. When I offered to help with dinner, she'd say sweetly, "Thanks, but I have my own way of doing things." The message was clear. This was her house, not mine. I tried to stay out of her way. I'd read to Lucas, help with his homework, and keep my belongings neat in the guest room. But nothing pleased her. If I washed dishes, she'd rewash them. If I folded laundry, she'd refold it with dramatic sighs. Dante worked long hours and didn't see the small cruelties. The way she'd serve everyone dinner but forget my plate. How she'd change the TV channel whenever I sat down. Her favorite trick was asking me to watch Lucas, then getting angry when she returned, claiming I'd done something wrong. I started keeping a notebook, writing down these little incidents. Something told me I'd need proof someday. The tension grew worse each day. Brittany never called me by name. It was always she or her when talking to Dante. "She left the coffee pot on," or "her soap is clogging the shower drain." I became a ghost in my own son's house. Lucas noticed everything with those sharp little eyes. He'd crawl into my lap when his mother wasn't looking, whispering, "Grandma, why is Mommy mean to you?" I'd smooth his hair and tell him grown-ups sometimes need time to adjust. But inside, my heart was breaking. One evening I heard Brittany on the phone in her bedroom. The walls were thin, and her voice carried. "I can't stand having her here," she hissed. "She acts like she owns the place. Dante babies her constantly, and I'm sick of it." There was a pause then. "I don't care if she just lost her husband. I lost my privacy, my peace, my home. Something has to change, or I'm going to lose my mind." I sat in the hallway, tears streaming down my face. I wasn't grieving properly. I was too busy trying to survive in hostile territory. That night, I called my sister and cried for an hour. "Maybe I should find my own place," I whispered. But apartments were expensive, and my savings were limited. The night of the soup incident, I'd spent all afternoon preparing my famous vegetable soup, the one my family had loved for 20 years. Lucas helped me chop carrots, standing on his little stool, chattering about his day at school. It felt normal and peaceful for the first time in weeks. Brittany came into the kitchen as I was seasoning the soup. "Smells wonderful," she said, but her smile looked painted on. "Need any help?" I was surprised by her offer but grateful. Maybe we were finally finding common ground. "Could you grab the napkins from the dining room?" I asked. She nodded eagerly. While I stepped away, she stayed by the stove, stirring the pot. "Just keeping it from sticking," she called out cheerfully. When I returned, she was already setting the table, humming softly. The soup was ladled into bowls, steam rising like incense. Dante complimented the smell, and even Brittany took a deep breath and smiled. "This is nice," she said. "Family dinner together." Within minutes of eating, the cramping started. First Dante, then Brittany, then me. Our stomachs twisted in knots, and we rushed to different bathrooms. Only Lucas seemed fine. He'd barely touched his soup, preferring his grilled cheese sandwich. That's when Brittany started screaming accusations, and my world tilted sideways. Lucas's words hung in the air like smoke. I saw Mommy put white powder in the soup. Brittany's face went through several colors. Red, then white, then greenish. She stammered, "He's just confused, he's 7 years old." But Dante was studying his son's face carefully. Lucas was an honest child, never one to make up stories for attention. "What kind of powder, buddy?" Dante asked gently, ignoring his wife's panicked protests. "It looked like the stuff Mommy puts in her smoothies," Lucas said. "The powder that makes her go to the bathroom a lot. She keeps it in the cabinet above the sink." Dante's eyes widened. He knew about Brittany's laxative powder. She'd been using it for her cleanses for months. The pieces clicked together in his mind like a horrible puzzle. "Lucas, did Mommy tell you to keep it secret?" I asked softly. He nodded, suddenly looking scared. "She said it was a surprise for Grandma, but it wasn't a good surprise, was it?" Brittany backed toward the door, shaking her head frantically. "This is insane. I would never. Lucas is mixed up. He's probably traumatized by all the fighting." But her words sounded hollow now. Dante stood slowly, still clutching his stomach, staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back. That night, Dante slept on the couch. I heard Brittany pleading through their bedroom door, her voice high and desperate. "You can't believe a child over your wife. I'm the mother of your son." But her arguments fell flat. I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had happened. She actually poisoned food to frame me. The cruelty was breathtaking. My stomach still ached, but my heart hurt worse. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Dante. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have seen what was happening." I typed back, "We'll figure this out together." But I wasn't sure how. At breakfast, Brittany acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes and coffee, chattering about Lucas's soccer practice. But her hands shook as she poured the orange juice, and she avoided eye contact with everyone. Lucas sat beside me, occasionally reaching over to pat my arm. Children have a way of offering comfort without words. Dante ate in silence, watching his wife's performance with growing unease. "I think we need some space," he finally said. Brittany's fork clattered to her plate. "What does that mean?" she asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. Dante looked at me, then at Lucas, then back at her. "It means Mom stays and we figure out why you did what you did." Brittany tried to control the narrative. She called her mother, sobbing into the phone about how Dante was choosing his mother over his wife. She posted vague messages on social media about family betrayal and feeling ganged up on. But Dante had found the laxative container, half empty, with powder residue around the lid. When confronted, she claimed she'd been constipated and might have accidentally gotten some on her hands while cooking. The excuse was pathetic. She attempted to make peace with me, bringing me coffee in bed and apologizing for misunderstanding the situation. "I was just so stressed," she said, perching on the edge of my chair. "Having everyone in the house, it's been overwhelming." I accepted her coffee, but not her excuses. "Brittany, you deliberately tried to make people think I poisoned them. That's not stress. That's calculated cruelty." She flinched at my direct words. "I never meant for anyone to get really sick," she whispered. I don't know what I wanted. But I could see in her eyes that she knew exactly what she'd wanted. Me gone, by any means necessary. Dante was spiraling between anger and heartbreak. He'd married this woman, had a child with her, built a life together. Now he was seeing a side of her that terrified him. The house became a war zone of politeness. We all moved around each other carefully, speaking in measured tones. Brittany cooked dinner and asked sweetly if I liked the seasoning. Dante worked late more often, avoiding the tension at home. Lucas was the only one acting normal, but I caught him watching his parents with worried eyes. He'd started having nightmares and asking me if I was going to move away. "Never, sweetheart," I promised, though I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. Brittany began leaving self-help articles around the house. How to blend families successfully and dealing with elderly parents. The passive aggression was exhausting. She'd highlight sections about boundaries and independence, leaving them where I'd find them. I started spending more time in my room, reading or doing crossword puzzles. The guest room became my sanctuary, the only space where I felt safe. Dante noticed my withdrawal and tried to draw me out, but the damage was deep. One evening, I overheard Brittany on the phone again. "She's playing the victim perfectly," she hissed. "Dante feels so guilty he can't see straight. I'm the one suffering here, but somehow I'm the villain." Her ability to twist reality was genuinely frightening. I realized then that this wasn't just about wanting me gone. She enjoyed the drama, the chaos, the attention it brought her. Dante tried family counseling. We sat in a sterile office while a therapist asked us to express our feelings using I statements. Brittany played her part perfectly, dabbing at her eyes and talking about how overwhelmed she felt. "I just want harmony in our home," she said, glancing at me meaningfully. "I never intended to hurt anyone's feelings." She was good. I had to give her that. She almost had the therapist convinced that this was just a misunderstanding between two strong women. But when asked directly about the laxative incident, she crumbled. Her story changed 3 times in 10 minutes. First it was an accident, then it was a prank that went wrong, then it was stress-induced confusion. Lucas, who'd been coloring quietly in the corner, looked up and said matter-of-factly, "Mommy told me it was a secret surprise for Grandma, but it made everyone's tummies hurt." The therapist's eyebrows raised. Dante reached over and squeezed my hand. In that moment, I felt vindicated. The truth was simple and ugly. Brittany had deliberately tried to harm people to get rid of me. The therapist recommended individual counseling for Brittany and suggested that perhaps some temporary space might help the family heal. It was professionally worded, but the message was clear. Brittany needed help and I needed protection. I started looking at apartments online. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I needed to know I had options. Dante caught me scrolling through rental listings one evening. "Mom, you don't have to do this," he said, sitting beside me on the bed. "This is your home too." But we both knew it wasn't that simple. As long as Brittany lived there, I'd never feel safe. "I need to know I can take care of myself," I explained. "Your father always handled everything, and when he died I felt so lost. Maybe it's time I learned to be independent again." Dante looked heartbroken. "She did this. She's the one who should leave." But we both knew that wasn't realistic. She was his wife, Lucas's mother. I was the easier one to relocate. That night, I found a small apartment across town. It was nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, but it had good light and was near a park. The rent would eat up most of my social security, but I'd manage. I put down a deposit without telling anyone. Sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing the game entirely. The apartment would be ready in 2 weeks. I planned to tell Dante and Lucas together, frame it as a positive step toward independence rather than a retreat. Lucas sensed something was changing. He became clingy, following me around the house and asking repeatedly if I was mad at him. "Never, sweetheart," I assured him. "You told the truth, and that was very brave." "But Mommy's sad all the time now," he said. "And Daddy sleeps on the couch. Is it because I told about the powder?" My heart ached for this little boy caught in the middle of adult problems. "Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices," I explained. "When that happens, other grown-ups have to figure out how to fix things. None of this is your fault, Lucas. None of it." I spent extra time reading to him, playing games, making memories. Soon I'd see him only on weekends and holidays. The thought made my chest tight with grief. Brittany watched our interactions with growing resentment. She'd interrupt our games, suddenly needing Lucas for baths or snacks. She was trying to limit my access to him, punishing us both. One afternoon, she snapped. "Stop filling his head with ideas about truth-telling. He's 7. He doesn't understand adult situations." I stared at her, amazed. She was actually angry at Lucas for being honest. "He understands right from wrong," I said quietly. "And so do I." She stormed out, but her mask was slipping. Dante was starting to see her true face. I told Dante about the apartment on a Sunday morning while Brittany was at yoga. We sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and watching Lucas play in the backyard. "I found a nice place," I said casually. "Move-in date is next Friday." Dante set down his mug hard, sloshing coffee onto the table. "Mom, no, we can work this out." But his voice lacked conviction. We both knew the situation was toxic and getting worse. "I need my own space," I said firmly. "Your father and I were married 42 years. I never lived alone, not once. Maybe it's time." I was trying to sound positive, but inside I was terrified. Dante looked defeated. She won. She wanted you gone, and now you're leaving. The pain in his voice almost changed my mind. I'm not leaving you or Lucas, I promised. I'm leaving a bad situation. There's a difference. We hugged for a long time, both of us crying a little. When Brittany returned from yoga, glowing and energetic, Dante told her about my decision. Her face went through a range of expressions before settling on concerned surprise. Oh no, are you sure? We were just starting to work things out. The performance was insulting, but I played along. It's time for me to be independent, I said. You'll have your house back. She had the grace to look slightly ashamed. Moving day arrived, gray and drizzly. Dante rented a truck, and we loaded my belongings in silence. Brittany helped carry boxes, playing the role of the concerned daughter-in-law who'd miss me terribly. Lucas cried when he realized I was really leaving. I don't want Grandma to go, he sobbed, wrapping his arms around my legs. I knelt down and looked into his tear-streaked face. I'm not going far, I promised. You can visit me anytime. We'll have adventures in my new place. He sniffled and nodded but didn't let go of my hand. The apartment was smaller than I'd remembered, but it was mine. Dante helped me arrange furniture while Lucas explored every closet and cabinet. This could be fun, Grandma, he said, bouncing on my new couch. Like a sleepover house. Brittany stood in the doorway, surveying her victory. She'd gotten what she wanted, me out of her house. But she didn't look happy. She looked nervous, like someone who'd won a game but wasn't sure about the prize. That evening, alone in my new place, I made dinner for one and ate it at my small table. The silence was different from the hostile quiet of Dante's house. This silence was peaceful, full of possibility instead of dread. My first week alone was an adjustment. I had to relearn how to live for myself, when to eat, what to watch on TV, how to fill the long hours. But gradually I found a rhythm. I joined a seniors group at the community center and signed up for a pottery class. My hands, which had spent months tensed with anxiety, slowly relaxed as I shaped clay on the wheel. Dante called every day, and Lucas visited twice that first week. We baked cookies and played board games, and he seemed to relax away from the tension at home. Daddy and Mommy fight a lot now, he told me matter-of-factly while we decorated sugar cookies. Daddy says Mommy needs to think about what she did. I nodded, but didn't comment. It wasn't my place to discuss his parents' problems. Brittany came with Dante once, ostensibly to see how I was settling in. She admired my decorating choices and commented on how cozy the place was. But her eyes were calculating, measuring my independence. You seem happy, she said, sounding almost surprised. I was surprised too. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not a burden or an intruder, just a woman making her own way. 2 months into my new life, Dante called with news. We're getting counseling, separately and together. Brittany's therapist says she has some issues with control and manipulation that go way back. I was proud of him for facing the truth, even though it was painful. How are you holding up? I asked. It's hard. Learning that the person you married isn't who you thought they were, it changes everything. His voice was heavy with exhaustion and grief. Lucas was thriving with the reduced tension at home. He'd started sleeping through the night again and was doing better in school. Children are like flowers. They bloom when the environment improves. My own life was expanding. I'd made friends in pottery class and started volunteering at the local food bank. One woman, Dorothy, had become a close friend. We went to movies and shared recipes, building the kind of easy friendship I'd missed for years. You look 10 years younger? Dante observed during one of our weekly dinners together. True was right. The constant stress had been aging me rapidly. Now, away from the daily battles, I was remembering who I used to be. But I missed the daily presence of my family. Independence was good for me, but it came at a cost. The truth about Brittany began emerging in therapy. Dante shared what he was learning, that she'd had a pattern of manipulation in previous relationships, that she struggled with anyone she perceived as competition for attention. Her first marriage ended because she couldn't handle her ex-husband's relationship with his daughter, Dante told me. She saw a 7-year-old as a threat. The pattern was becoming clear. She'd targeted me because Dante loved me, because Lucas adored me, because I represented something she couldn't control. The poisoning incident wasn't an isolated event. It was an escalation of months of psychological warfare. Lucas started talking more freely about things he'd observed. How Mommy would get angry when Daddy hugged me. How she'd mutter under her breath when I helped with homework. How she'd send him to his room whenever he showed me affection. I thought I was protecting her privacy, Dante said. I didn't realize I was enabling abuse. The word hung in the air between us. Abuse. That's what it had been. Systematic, deliberate, emotional abuse. I felt vindicated, but not victorious. There's no joy in watching your son's marriage crumble, even when his wife has been cruel to you. Brittany began showing up at my apartment uninvited. She'd bring coffee and pastries, wanting to clear the air between us. These visits made me uncomfortable, but I tried to be polite. I know I handled things badly, she'd say, perching on my couch like she owned it. I was just so overwhelmed with everything changing. Her apologies always came with explanations that weren't quite excuses, but weren't quite accountability either. I'd listen politely, serve tea, and wait for her to leave. But her visits felt invasive, like she was checking up on me rather than making amends. One afternoon, she brought Lucas with her. While he played in my bedroom, she leaned forward conspiratorially. Dante is being so dramatic about everything. You know how men are. They can't handle emotional complexity. I set down my teacup carefully. Brittany, you deliberately poisoned food to frame me for hurting my family. That's not emotional complexity, that's dangerous behavior. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I never meant for anyone to get seriously hurt, she whispered. I don't know what I wanted, but I could see in her eyes that she knew exactly what she'd wanted. Me gone, discredited, and humiliated. Dante made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. He filed for separation and asked Brittany to move out temporarily. I need space to think, he told her, and Lucas needs stability. Brittany was furious. She called me, screaming through the phone. This is your fault. You turned him against me. You couldn't stand that he chose me over you. I hung up, but she called back immediately. You're a bitter old woman who can't let go, she hissed. You've ruined my marriage, my family, my life. I hung up again and turned off my phone. The next morning, Dante appeared at my door with 2 suitcases and a scared-looking Lucas. Can we stay here for a few days? He asked. Just until I figure out what's next? My tiny apartment wasn't equipped for 3 people, but I made it work. Lucas slept on an air mattress in my bedroom. Dante took the couch, and I gave up my bed, gladly. Having them close again felt like a blessing, but I knew it wasn't permanent. Dante needed to rebuild his life, and that might or might not include me living nearby. I'm sorry, Mom, he said that first night. I should have protected you from the beginning. I hugged him tight, my baby boy, who was now a grown man facing the wreckage of his marriage. Brittany launched a campaign to win Dante back. She sent flowers to my apartment with notes about how sorry she was. She left voicemails promising to change, to get better, to be the wife he deserved. But she also started spreading stories around town. She told people that I'd manipulated Dante into leaving her, that I was a controlling mother who couldn't let her son have his own life. Some people believed her. I'd get strange looks at the grocery store, whispers behind my back. The story she told was simpler than the truth. Evil mother-in-law breaks up happy marriage. Dorothy defended me fiercely whenever she heard gossip. That woman poisoned food to frame her, she'd tell anyone who'd listen. What kind of person does that? But mud sticks, even when you're innocent. Dante was heartbroken by his wife's behavior. Even now, she's lying, he said. She can't just admit what she did and try to make it right. He was grieving the woman he thought he'd married. Lucas seemed happier staying with me. He giggled more, slept better, and stopped asking anxious questions about everyone's feelings. Children know when they're safe. As months passed, Dante began to rebuild. He found a therapist who helped him understand how he'd been manipulated too. She was so good at making me doubt my own perceptions, he realized. I knew something was wrong, but she'd make me feel crazy for thinking it. He started looking at apartments, places where he and Lucas could make a fresh start. Part of me hoped he'd ask me to move with them, but I also knew my independence had been good for me. Brittany's attempts at reconciliation grew more desperate. She showed up at Lucas's school, trying to convince the teachers that Dante was being influenced by a bitter mother-in-law. The school counselor called Dante, concerned about the disruption. "She's unraveling," Dante told me, "and it's scary." We both worried about what she might do next. I suggested family counseling that included me, Dante, and Lucas, learning how to be a healthy family unit, whatever that looked like. Dante agreed, and we started working with a therapist who specialized in rebuilding trust after trauma. Slowly, we began to heal. Not completely, and not without setbacks, but we were moving forward together. A year after the poisoning incident, Dante filed for divorce. Brittany fought it bitterly, claiming he was being manipulated by me. But the evidence was clear. Therapy records, documentation of the laxative incident, witnesses to her increasingly erratic behavior. Lucas was in counseling too, learning to process what he'd witnessed. His therapist said he was remarkably resilient, but needed stability and honesty from the adults in his life. I'd kept my apartment, but spent most weekends with Dante and Lucas in their new place. We were building new traditions, new memories, not tainted by walking on eggshells. Brittany was required to attend parenting classes and anger management as part of the custody agreement. She had supervised visits with Lucas, who was polite but distant with her. "I love Mommy," he told me one day, "but I don't like the things she did." At 8 years old, he was learning to separate love from accepting harmful behavior, a lesson many adults never master. Dante was dating someone new, a kind kindergarten teacher named Melanie who treated Lucas like gold and invited me to family dinners without hesitation. The contrast with Brittany was striking. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in March. Dante emerged from the courthouse, looking drained but relieved. "It's over?" he said, and we both knew he meant more than just the legal proceedings. Brittany had gotten the house, but would have to buy out Dante's share. She'd moved back in and was trying to rebuild her life, but the lies she'd told had caught up with her. Many friends had distanced themselves when the truth came out. I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the family we could have been, relief that the chaos was finally over. Lucas would grow up knowing that truth matters, that adults should be held accountable for their actions. Dante, Lucas, and I went out for ice cream after the courthouse. It felt like a celebration, but a quiet one. We'd survived something toxic and come out stronger. Melanie joined us later, bringing flowers for me and a new book for Lucas. "Family is what we make it," she said, squeezing my hand. I thought about my husband, gone but not forgotten, and how proud he'd be of the man Dante had become. 2 years later, Dante and Melanie got married in my backyard. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Lucas walked me down the aisle as the mother of the groom, grinning proudly in his little suit. Melanie had asked me to help plan the wedding, including me in every decision. The contrast with how Brittany had treated me was stark. This was what healthy family relationships looked like: inclusion, respect, consideration. Brittany wasn't invited, which caused some drama, but Dante held firm. "She poisoned my mother and lied about it for months," he told anyone who questioned the decision. Some actions have permanent consequences. Lucas was happy that day, surrounded by people who loved him without conditions or manipulation. He'd grown into a confident, truthful child who knew his worth. I'd kept my apartment, but spent most of my time with the family. Dante and Melanie had bought a house with a mother-in-law suite, and we were all excited about the next phase of our lives. As I watched Dante kiss his new bride, I felt overwhelming gratitude. We'd been through hell, but we'd made it to the other side together. Melanie gave birth to a daughter, Allie, the following spring. Holding my new granddaughter, I marveled at how different this felt from when Lucas was born. No tension, no walking on eggshells, no fear that my presence was unwelcome. Lucas was a devoted big brother, helping with bottles and teaching Allie to clap her hands. He'd grown into a thoughtful, empathetic child who looked out for others. Brittany had remarried and moved across the country. She sent birthday cards to Lucas, but otherwise stayed out of our lives. It was better that way for everyone, especially Lucas. I'd found my place in this new family structure. I helped with childcare, taught Lucas to cook my special recipes, and provided the stability that comes with unconditional love. Sometimes I thought about that night when she poisoned the soup, trying to destroy me with lies and manipulation. It seemed like a lifetime ago. something that had happened to a different person. The woman who'd cowered in the guest room, afraid to defend herself, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth wasn't dependent on other people's approval. Today, I'm making my famous vegetable soup again. Lucas stands on his old stool, now too big for it, but still wanting to help. Ally babbles from her high chair, trying to grab the wooden spoon. Melanie chops onions beside me, asking questions about seasoning and timing. She wants to learn my recipes, to carry on family traditions. Dante sets the table, humming softly, something he never did during those dark months with Brittany. The soup simmers on the stove, filling the kitchen with warmth and comfort. No fear, no anxiety, no wondering who might try to sabotage it. Just family, working together to create something nourishing. Lucas tastes the broth and grins. "Perfect, Grandma," he says, and I ruffle his hair. He's learned that love doesn't lie, that family protects each other, that truth is always worth telling. We sit around the table, Dante, Melanie, Lucas, Ally, and me. 5 people who chose each other, who built something beautiful from the ashes of something toxic. I ladle soup into bowls, the same recipe, but in a completely different world. Ally claps her hands, Lucas tells us about his school play, and Melanie asks about my pottery class. This is what victory looks like. Not revenge or vindication, but peace. The simple miracle of a family dinner where everyone is safe, loved, and free to be themselves.